Letterboxd is like my anime list, but for movies. I hope hearing that string of words caused you physical pain. It's basically a site where users rate films or shows. I don't use it because I know I'd end up wasting 2 hours daily reviewing niche movies I loved but no one's ever heard about in years. Like, Slime, ever heard of Danganronpa? It's actually awesome. TLDR, the internet has a neat little list of its top 10 shows, a list which I watched 2 shows on recently, so I figured might as well see what else is in there, and more importantly, whether the rest of the list actually even holds up. So let's start with... Truth be told, Ping-Pong The Animation is not actually number 10, it's number 14th, but the 4 shows I'm skipping over are skipped over for a reason. Largely because I want to talk about Ping-Pong The Animation, because it's amazing and I love it and I want 7 of it in my closet where I keep my not so secret peepers. 2 of these shows I skipped on are anime I decided not to talk about today, Berserk and Vinland Saga. With Berserk, it's a matter of preference. I really don't feel like getting into Berserk right now because I'm trying to keep my Berserk virginity for when it finishes. If it finishes. I originally made a joke about virginity and guts, but I was informed by an acquaintance that it would be very insensitive, so I guess I am not making that joke anymore. With Vinland Saga, it's actually because I've already discussed why I'm not its biggest fan on this very channel, on a really old video from back when I actively covered anime, which I stopped doing because anime communities aren't really as fun to interact in the content space anymore. That video is ass, and my points do not come across, so I decided not to talk about the show again here as I don't want to bring attention to my, shame from the past. I do like the second season a lot more than the first though, if that's any consolation. Oh, but I cooked with the Beastars video. Ping-Pong The Animation is a sports anime about 2 friends who are involved in a competitive level high school ping pong tournament. It doesn't focus on the sport, instead exploring the coming of age elements that a teenager would naturally experience while all of this is happening. Sure, the protagonists are both extremely good, in fact prodigies at it, but the show is a lot more about what these characters choose to do with their skills, whether they should pursue a career in this, and even if they could. Their playstyles are practically false to each other. Peko, who seriously uses this hairstyle, okay, how does he ever lose with this on his head? I cannot imagine anyone not getting distracted completely by whatever is happening here. Nonetheless, Peko plays very loosey-goosey, except he's a weenie, not a Lucy. He's cocky and keeps laughing it up as he tears down his opponents, calling himself a hero in part to taunt them. His friend, Smile, who ironically never smiles, but there's a plot reason for that, so joke's on you, actually plays like a robot. He makes calculated moves to the point other people started calling him a robot instead. So, that is the elephant in the room. Whether it's right or wrong to assume that a man who hates this art style's automatically radically dumb. This show's peculiar art style is largely a result of being directed by Masaaki Yuasa, one of my absolute favorites to ever do it in the anime industry. This man single-handedly has spearheaded several of the shows I hold highest on my anime records, such as 2 out of 5 of my current 10 out of 10s, or one of my favorite anime endings, or even... okay, we do not bring up Yurei Deco in this house. I don't think there's any other show that has this style of animation, unless we count other shows Yuasa has had a very heavy hand in. And even then, this show has its own set of rules to follow with the animation that are absolutely genius in nature. The striking and disproportionate bodies that perfectly convey the movements of the characters and allow for some extremely unique animation sequences that you couldn't really do on a style that's limited to specific shapes or heavily textured eyes or one of those tracking shots you see in episode 1 of many standard shonens that are trying to trick you into thinking the show is actually good. Look no further than the opening. Towards the end there's this shot of Peko licking off an exploded bubblegum from his face, and I dare you to bring up any other anime that would actually convey this activity to this level of visceralness. Put it away, I don't want to look at this anymore. You know that one scene in the movie where Barry is stalking the tennis ball that probably inspired that one other shot in Challengers that also does that but with real life? Yeah, this show does that all the time. The other big rule was actually trying to adapt the comic flow of the manga. A lot of people don't seem to realize how important comic flow is to making a lot of manga be as good as they are. I outright have trouble finishing manga when this aspect isn't done to perfection. Usually, anime don't need this, since you can just animate the flow, but they decided to make an exception to this, which is why a lot of the show has these manga-like collages that are timed with impact to convey the movement without movement, in between the parts with a lot of movement, and if you excuse me, I am having trouble with my bowel movement. Okay, I'm back. So, in short, even if the show isn't visually pretty, it does use its art style to the fullest. It's one of those examples that show you don't have to be a good artist to use animation to tell a good story, and I think that's super inspiring. It definitely works mostly because Yuasa is incredible at building a scene and bringing all of its visual elements and narrative elements together to perfection through his directing. Because like, when I look at the narrative in a vacuum, it really isn't that groundbreaking. Its most interesting element is that it bends parallels between the sports genre tropes and real-life sporting scenes, which does make for a double-edged sword where on one hand the show does come off as tropey within its genre, but on the other, it does make genuine attempts to subvert all of those by just covering them more deeply than, "Ooh, look at me throw the Kamehameha, bing bong." I know it's not pronounced Kamehameha, but it makes me laugh to say it like that. The writing here really is a shining example of the importance of execution. As I already said, this show focuses a lot more closely on the way characters relate to the sport, and how it affects their lives. The iconic moments here aren't about a character winning or losing, but more so about other people breaking through their expectations of life, particularly on a story where all the characters are prodigies. The weight of expectations and the way the relationships revolve on the sport is really important. There's this dichotomy between being a prodigy who is supposed to be amazing and have life figured out, but also you're a teenager who has not figured anything, and also there's this stupid little kid with this ridiculous haircut that's apparently better than you. This is an absolutely skillful display of how character writing doesn't have to confine itself to genre norms. It doesn't ask of you to explore why the character should win or lose the competitions, but rather it focuses on what it means to love something so much you dedicate your life to it. And how ability plays a large part on that discussion. Its underlying message is kind of realist in a sense. It rallies a relatable issue to most who are or have been in their late teens, which means it really helped me out whenever I was debating what I wanted to do with my life at that age, since I coincidentally watched this before I had to pick university. Funnily enough, I also watched Atomic Galaxy while starting university, and it also had the perfect message I needed back then. Ping-Pong The Animation poses that there's two general reasons why people choose to do any non-essential thing, either because they like it or because they are good at it. Nothing else, nothing more, except maybe both. Note I'm saying do something in the grander sense of the phrase. Of course I want to do Jessica Rabbit and her zesty husband at the same time, but doing them all the time would not be like a recurrent hobby or whatever. I mean do something in the practical sense of developing skill and a style at a task for the purpose of individual self-expression, irregardless of actual profession, though it can be related. Yeah, I bet you all thought I was silly and stupid at the start of the video, but no, I'm capable of complex thought and thinking. I'm perpetually high, and that's why I brought up the sexy rabbit and woman. It's the why and the how to those reasons, cause good or cause fun, that this show explores within its characters and themes, which really creates a full complex image that should frankly resonate emotionally with many. I'd be a fool not to know I hold this show in such high regard because it's one of the few times I've cried while watching something. And even then, this show's emotional moments for me were actually happy ones, which made it absolutely incredible to experience. All the other examples of me crying are at least bittersweet, like the last time I cried was with the fucking rock with the googly eyes in Everything Everywhere All at Once. And that's funny, but so sweet I just couldn't help it. Still, really different. It really makes you wonder how Ping-Pong The Animation did it. It achieved making me feel so happy for a fictional character that I could cry. I hope people familiar with the show know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, I'm talking about episode 10. It is one of the best anime episodes ever. That is not to say the other 10 episodes aren't remarkable, by the way. It just starts showing its colors better after the first few episodes, and even then, those are great. So that's basically what it boils down to. Extremely well-timed editing, a subversive approach to tropes that is relatively subtle, thematic depth, unique animation style, and a soundtrack for the ages. I didn't say much about the soundtrack, but it's also so amazing. I literally try to save it for special videos in my channel, and that still hasn't happened cause YouTube algorithm's stupid. Ushio, who is the composer, killed it. Big question, should you watch it? Absolutely yes. I can see people not liking this show for a few reasons, such as the tropes being present. Even if it's not the focus of the story, it can be quite predictable and kinda simple. There's few major characters in it, which makes all of them have a degree of quality, but it certainly doesn't keep you guessing about what's going to happen next, at least not once you're past the halfway point. It's part of its commentary and message, which means it's fundamental enough that if the predictability of the sport element is not engaging enough for the viewer, they could find it boring. I feel like that's a super niche case that will only apply to a handful of people, more so if you're watching this video, cause that means YouTube notice you're a freak for audiovisual media like me and your preferences are probably really open. Still, it felt like it was worth saying, especially since I'll ask the same question for every show I talk about today. And if you enjoyed this video thus far, I do recommend you go watch my other stuff after you finish this video. There's this funny ass 7-hour duology in a similar style that would have gotten 2 million views if anyone else uploaded it. YouTube gets pissy because I talk about a variety of topics. Gaming, movies, cartoons, you want it? It's yours, my friend, as long as you have enough watch time. A show about human stupidity pretending to be a dramatization of the Chernobyl disaster of whichever stupid year that happened on. 1986, but haha, Chernobyl go boom, many people die, me use comedy to cope. Now this is a show I watched specifically for this video, and I frankly had no plans to watch it myself. It's just that I heard very good things about it, so I was going in expecting something great. And I must say it, I don't think it was that good. But there's stuff here that's actually both visceral and somewhat refreshing. The actual writing didn't inspire anything in me, I was not attached to the characters or what was happening, but at the end of the day, this is still a dramatization of historical events, and so it's expected they must forfeit character arcs or what the kids these days call hype moments. Bad term, I prefer saying awesomeness happens. So, the Chernobyl disaster for people who don't know. Government does nuclear technology for cheap. Nuclear technology is hard to manage and has confusing controls. They call the guys at IT who tells them to try turning it off and on again. That causes a mini explosion in the reactor that could end in big explosion. Government sweeps it under the rug. Scientists are like, hey government, please, half of Europe may explode if we do not stop the mega explosion the mini explosion will cause. Government allows the scientists to stop larger explosion while downplaying involvement that the people are going to die stopping big explosion. Fall guys take the blame for the incident and government cleans their hands by saying, oopsie! Nuclear energy is demonized by the world, which in turn causes lower explosion in the form of global warming and the destruction of the ozone layer. This show made me angrier and more scared of the people in power with their negligence in furthering short-term objectives way more than most thrillers about it, because it doesn't pose anyone as an outright villain, it just poses absolutely everyone as an absolute gigantic idiot. Except for the occasional guy whose absolute gigantic idiot moment happens at the request of an absolute gigantic idiot who told him to do an absolutely gigantic dumb thing. It's just that beyond showing a large chain of human stupidity with spectacular recreations and research of the event, I don't think there's a lot more to this. It does suck to know it's historical when you see that one episode about the party of men who had to go stop the big explosion and inevitably exploded themselves from radiation or whatever. Same when you see that one pregnant lady who insists on seeing her husband actively melt since the hospitals were understaffed and underpaid to deal with such a tragedy. And when they had to kill the dogs? Slime, I'm not a dog person, but even I feel bad about that one. And that's it? It just ends? After like 400 minutes of dragged out situations that basically boil down to humans being stupid for different reasons but mostly lying to the population to save face, you don't really get much out of it. It's super interesting and informative, and a clear showcase of good filmmaking production-wise, but at the same time, I kinda couldn't wait for most episodes to be over. I feel like the effectiveness of the story is brought down by documentary pacing on a dramatization that should by all means indulge in TV drama pacing. Oppenheimer is a good example of what I mean. Here they spent 30 minutes on these army guys who have to kill their radioactive dogs just because they knew it would upset people. That's the kind of boring writing this show ends up having at times. The message of the story really is, well, humans are stupid, especially when the government becomes negligent and starts hiding stuff like the Epstein client. Oh wait, I do think there's some character arcs, but they are clearly there to fill up some of the holes on what a regular human would be thinking in that situation and all the moral implications they would have to endure. This sounds complex, but I guess it's just fine. Big question. Should you watch it? I think the answer is leaning closer to yes, but if you don't feel like it, then no. While it's not the greatest thing, especially not nearly as great as people say, I do think the show is good enough for it to be enjoyed by most audience members. I would only tell you a flat no if you don't want to watch a show that could upset you. If you are a fan of historical events or how the government, media outlets and standard people react to massive critical events, then this show is gonna be for you. It's super informative and it's not presented as a documentary, so there's some entertainment value to it. It gives you data, it tells you how the reactor worked, it tells you the political landscape during and around the event. All of those details, that's just wonderful. That said, there's a lot of better stuff to watch on TV. A lot of the praise to this show is sadly very undeserved. It happened to air in very close proximity to Game of Thrones Season 8, a show so panned people were eager to make it clear to HBO that it sucked ass, and part of that movement led to collateral damage that gave this show a better score than it probably would have gotten otherwise. Currently, people of course don't remember that whole ordeal, but the show still managed to position itself on way too high regards in sites like IMDb and Letterboxd. I don't think it matters, it's just reviews on a website. I guess it's relevant because I'm talking about it here for that reason. I just think it's kinda phony.
These 15! 10 commandments!
No, the name does not refer to a really big poop. The Dekalog is a 10-part anthology series directed by Krzysztof Kieślowski, who you may know if you're familiar with the Colors trilogy. He's a Polish director held in high esteem because he clearly knows how to direct the audiovisual medium, and a large part of his most iconic short films are featured in the Dekalog, including shortened versions of a short film about love and a short film about killing. Each of the 10 episodes are somewhat fashioned after one of the 10 commandments, but the 10 commandments get funky at some point due to how different religious religions have adapted them, so keep in mind only one episode directly discusses religious themes. Besides, how do you make an episode about keeping the Shabbat day holy without making it strictly religious? Actually, I can perfectly see an episode centered around a guy who commits a crime and somehow someone manages to take the fall for it, and all they have to do to get away with the crime is stay at home and do nothing. But then they start getting shamed by their family members for completely unrelated things. Whoa, Christoph, hit me up. Oh, actually, is Christoph still alive? I have bad news, he died in 96. Well, I guess if anyone wants to do that idea, just know I'm available and I would love to actually do a production of cinema. That would be pretty cool. So let's do a mini episode ranking in the middle of this other video because it would be funny, and also I want to do this Rapnel amputations where eventually I rank everything I put on last place. That sounds fun as fuck. Additionally, I do get to speak about each episode with its different themes and styles because they're all very different. 10. 9. Okay, number 10 is number 9. This thing is gonna get confusing, so I'll just use funny nicknames and pretend they are just called that. Number 10 is a short film about getting cocked. Guy can't get hard anymore and asks his wife to cock him, and to no one's surprise he ends up getting jealous and depressed about it. I can't take this one seriously. Not only is the drama frankly a bit ridiculous and obviously going to lead to problems, but the theme is too in your face and the characters really aren't all that compelling. I didn't feel anything from the cinematography or writing, even if they were good, but I definitely agree the only thing that stood out as amazing to me is the performances. Definitely the only episode that I think runs its course unceremoniously, and thus I don't have almost anything to say about it. 9. A short film about doing it dead. Episode 4 is about a lady who finds a letter from her dead mother in an envelope from her dad who's gone on a trip and she doesn't know if she wants to open it. Not really a fan of this one. Though the actual events are entertaining and the pacing isn't bad, the story leaves a really ugly taste in my mouth. Long story short, the big reveal is that the woman is really into incest, which is kind of a shoddy twist that recontextualizes most of the episode into something I didn't quite enjoy. At least since the main character is a drama student, a lot of the storyline can be taken with a grain of salt, which makes it a bit better. Perhaps her advances on her father aren't actually genuine, but simply a ploy to see if he'd allow it to happen, because that would certainly confirm whether he's got parental instincts for her or not. Again, sort of uncomfortable topic, but there could be more depth to this one than it first displays and that I can get from it because I'm kinda dumb. Number 8, a short film about closure. Episode 8 is about this girl who sits in a professor's lectures about philosophy and morality. They go off on these discussions as the thematic core of the episode, which means that even if there's not a lot of creativity to how stuff in the classroom is shot, at least the writing is super direct and efficient. This is also by far the episode that most takes advantage of its existence as a piece of the Dekalog as a whole. Not only does this episode make direct references to the core discussion of episode 2, but it also features very direct references to aspects every episode shares, primarily that they all take place around the same apartment building, and that this weird guy shows up in every episode as some sort of angel observer that may work as an audience parallel. I think he's an audience parallel, but he could just be a straight up angel / demon thing. Basically, it's the one episode that feels like part of a whole, in a really satisfying way too. The actual morality being discussed between the girl and the teacher is very unsubtly an internal conflict between the two, as it turns out the girl is not just a researcher, but specifically a girl who was refused shelter by the teacher during World War II. It makes the actual discussion have 3 layers, which is the raw morality layer that's frequently discussed, the layer of how morality is taught and explained at a professional level, and the layer at which morality is banned due to the actual complexity of the people involved in it. If very well the visuals don't spring you to life, at least the actual writing is exceptional. This is the second worst and I'm already having praise. Actually, this is the third worst. I move it around. What the fuck? Did I not proofread? Good job, Nate! You never proofread your scripts, idiot! You're so good at this! 7. A short film about killing. Episode 5 is actually called As Fact Killing. The episode is simply a condensed version of the movie, for better and for worse. So, this kid Janek kills a taxi driver and is awaiting execution, being one of the first people to be handed the death penalty in a long time. His lawyer is new to the law, but even with a really good argument, there's not much he can do for Janek. So, they start talking about the events as he tries to find some redemption for the killer, who actually killed the driver for a pretty good reason. This is one of those episodes that changes in complexity as you reach the end and get to know the lawyer, the killer, and their thoughts around the morality of what happened. It's a really interesting discussion, but I also don't think it has enough substance and impact. Its discussion is true, but about as uncommon as the trolley problem. That is to say, you've probably heard all of what this has to say many times before. You can also notice immediately that this episode looks completely different from the others. It's one of the most visual episodes as you get to see Janek's crime and later his execution, and it's all shown with this interesting yellow filter that was achieved through the actual camera lens, so the atmosphere is quite oppressive and impactful. All in all, a great short film. Just pales in some pacing aspects and the discussion feels a little trite since it's got no surprises in store. 6. A short film about abandoning your children for Christmas. Episode 3 sees a man, Janus, reuniting with a previous lover whom he had an affair with. That's her name, she's called Ewa, but it sounds like an alien noise. They don't have intentions to date each other at all this time around, but instead, they are trying to find Ewa's husband, who has gone missing. As this happens, they discuss their relationship and find more clues about her husband's whereabouts in a story that's surprisingly compelling. There are tons of themes about adultery in this story, particularly a heavy focus on how the affair affected both of them in their respective formal relationships. But the more interesting aspect for me was just the dynamic between both of the protagonists and the mystery that surrounds them. There's bits and bobs to the story that are truly heartfelt, and the complexity of their dynamic is told through subtleties in the narrative and performances. It's strangely non-romantic in the best way. I can easily see this being turned into a fantastic drama movie if someone were to make an adaptation of it to make it longer and deeper. Number 5, a short film about kidnapping your daughter. There's 2 layers to this story that got me to put it halfway down the list, but the main one is the direct plot of the episode, which does involve the main character kidnapping her own daughter from her mother, who pretends to be her mother's daughter because her mother's real daughter, which is the main character, happened to have a daughter of her own while she was underage, and her grandmother didn't want her granddaughter to know she has the result of a horrible situation that happened to her mother, so they agree to have her think her mother is actually her sister. I can do this 2 times fast. The main character kidnapping her own daughter from her mother, who pretends to be her mother's daughter because her mother's real daughter, which is the main character, happened to have a daughter of her own when she was underage, and her grandmother didn't want her granddaughter to know she was the result of a horrible situation that happened to her mother, so they agreed to have her think her mother is actually her sister. Whoo! Top 10 rappers Eminem was too afraid to diss. It's convoluted, but the mother-daughter relationships are actually super interesting and kind of heartfelt in all of their weirdness, with an equal part of the conflict being behind the intentions of each character. The real victim of the situation is obviously the small kid, and there's this underlying sacred layer to the story, some sort of commentary about this obsession the disparity between the younger and older generations causes. It's illustrating that neither of them is the best options, since they both commit mistakes of their own, and the natural conclusion is that the girl is gonna have a tough time either way, a matter which is always true whenever similar conflicts arise in people and situations we experience in real life. 4. A short film about cancer. This one's kinda complex in its simplicity, but it's basically an exploration of the following moral dilemma. A woman is pregnant with a child who is not her husband's. Consequently, her husband is in the hospital with a critical condition, and thus she reaches a decision. If her husband lives, she'll abort the child. If the husband dies, the child will be born. Creation will be his name. He came along! The film doesn't actually focus on the woman, but we do get to see her own internal conflict with the situation alongside outstanding acting. But rather we focus on the doctor in charge of her husband's case. The doctor firmly believes in God and disagrees with both of the woman's options. Not only that, but his prognosis would be the deciding element in the woman's choice, meaning he'd be indirectly killing the fetus by declaring the husband could live. For those curious, yes, he does think about lying and he decides not to do it for reasons you see in the episode, which are too convoluted to talk about here. Anyways, alongside this we also get to see snippets of the doctor's life, which help bring weight to his decision making. This one shades mostly on the performances and the cinematography. There's a lot of really cool shots that parallel the events of the story, and both plants and liquids are used to indirectly represent what the characters are feeling or doing. My favorite element is how the music is half diegetic, which means it's actually happening within the story. It makes simple shots like this one of the bee getting out of some preserved strawberries feel a lot more grandiose. Super good execution here. 3. A short film about scams. This has got to be the least thematically heavy episode of the Dekalog. In fact, some people even call it a black comedy. It's 2 brothers scheming and quarreling over their father's very expensive sticker collection that he left as one of his only inheritance, which they try to finish so they can sell it for a massive profit. This is by far the most normal of the episodes. It doesn't feel as pretentious or artistically charged as the other 9, as it is mostly about seeing the brother relationship evolve around the stamp collection. This also makes it one of the funnest episodes to sit through, and just for that it gets 3rd place. Added to that, it's the 10th episode, so it's pretty nice to have at least one episode to wind down from the weirdly complex relationships in all of the other episodes. Do I call it a dark comedy myself? I'm not sure. In the sense of being funny, it isn't, and in the sense of being dramatic comedy a la Dante Alighieri, yeah, it also isn't that dramatic, so. And then I added a so for no reason. Episode 6 was so popular it got extended into the actual film titled A Short Film About Love, though I like to call it a short film about busting way too early, and I'm not gonna explain why for people who have not seen it. It's about this stalker guy, Tomek, unrelated but that's a really epic sounding name, who confesses to a woman called Magda. She spends way too many nights with men she doesn't have a connection with, and Tomek watches her very creepily. Thankfully, the movie basically starts with him telling her that he's been stalking, and what follows is a very unusual love story about 2 people with unusual beliefs about love. Tomek thinks love is everything. He lives to love, and he constantly does things in a weird attempt to get closer to Magda. Unlucky for him, Magda thinks love is nothing but passion and sex, which luckily for him also makes her more accepting of his behavior. Ultimately, it's a story about a realist having an encounter with an idealist and getting infected by his thoughts. What I love about it is that the writing invites you to indulge in Magda's worldview by making Tomek an undeniable creep, which makes your understanding of him somewhat parallel Magda's. It's innately good dramatic writing. I don't want to spoil the ending, but it's true the ending shift in the movie is noticeable. Not only does it differ from the rest of the film, but the ending of the original episode feels more suited to the story. That specific aspect with Magda becoming more idealistic was paralleled with Tomek becoming more realistic, and the film adaptation drops that. So I'm kinda divided on that aspect of the story, but I don't want to go further into it because I want to give you a chance to experience it yourself. Oh yeah, though it's not as obvious as with episodes 2 and 5, this one still has cinematographic flair. I love all the shots with high contrast spreads as a background to the darker foreground. They are occasional and not particularly impressive or impactful, but it does bring the work a little sense of style. And at 1, a short film about beep beep boop boop. At the top 1 I put number 1, which is a spectacular but brief exploration of fate. As in episode 1, if that wasn't clear. The plot of this one is simple. A dad and his kid are really into computers, with the kid being extremely smart and capable of rudimentary coding, as well as pretty advanced math for a boy his age. Undoubtedly, a child raised by the word and doctrine of science. However, after finding a dead dog, he starts to wonder about the nature of life and death and such, much like how I wonder why I've mentioned dead dogs 2 times in a row this video so far. Don't worry, at least there's only one more show in this list where a dog dying may be relevant. Point is, the kid starts questioning his dad's purely scientific outlook and begins exploring how religion approaches death, which also happens to be the main point of discussion this episode, the disparity between science and religion, and the way both can be unreliable and flawed regardless of their properties. This is all done with some pretty smart but direct visual choices in the way natural light baits the religious discussion, while the toxic green light of the computer, which recurs throughout the story, is prominent when discussing raw data. I describe it as toxic, but the green lighting is way cooler. There's even this homeless guy that appears constantly throughout the episode, and while he may have had a part on the events that happen towards the end of the episode, I believe his presence is meant to play off this visual element. For the homeless guy who doesn't have use in pondering science and religion, perhaps his light is simply this fire that keeps him warm from the harsh conditions he lives by, a raging chaotic flame that is the recipient of his fate, as well as a visceral element of nature that exists regardless of human morality. It's not a religious fate, simply the fate that he'll make it another day. It's a pretty refreshing take on the topic that doesn't aim to answer which is better or correct, but instead poses the third option where neither is definitive. Both are propense to randomness and contradiction in life, which results in some great discussion about fate. It's kinda hard to discuss the effectiveness of the message since it's tied to one of the few spoilable elements, but I absolutely think it hits you like a damn truck even if you aren't paying attention. No characters in this story die via truck, by the way, but it would be a pretty funny way to indirectly take a crack at it. Alright. List done. As you can see, overall a really good show, but it does require a few things. So, let me hit you with big question. Should you watch it? I think the yes is as proportional as you have patience. My favorite shows manage to be both entertaining and have elements that you can stick your pliers into and dissect. This is a show where all the fun comes from dissecting the episodes and playing surgeon. As you see by my approach to describing each episode, they all have strong thematic elements, but I also never said anything was particularly cool or awesome in the simple entertainment level. It's a slow show and every episode is about an hour, so if you're not down for some stuff that's heavily on the balance towards the perceptually demanding, maybe watch an episode and see how you like it. The good thing is that as an anthology, you're free to watch whichever episode sorts up your alley the most. No episodes depend on each other, so if you're interested, go ahead. This aligns with my idea of the Criterion Collection roulette, by the way, where I say 1 in 3 things in the Criterion Collection are old and kinda boring to watch, while the other 2 either stand the test of time or have elements that were important enough to see their significance towards the world of live-action cinema. It's completely unrelated to anything I'm talking about, but you know, whenever I see the little Criterion Collection logo, I know for a fact there's a 1 in 3 chance I'm gonna fucking despise the movie I'm about to watch. Dun dun dun, dun dun. David Lynch is high, he made a show, it's good. Twin Peaks is a show which has historical importance to TV. It was clearly not the first serialized series for sure, and yet it's the first example of one that made people go so insane about it that they had to rush out the ending of the mystery. Okay, to be precise, people were insane about it, but then they stopped caring by the end of the season, and so they started a second season with the reveal in order to attract more viewers, only for the show to not have anything better to do and get cancelled. But still, the result is a wonderfully surreal show that includes a plethora of weird visual and iconic scenes. It does not stand the test of time on its own, not by a long shot. Most of the second season is spent on unnecessary mysteries that are not remotely that interesting, while the first shows its age because the pacing of some episodes isn't the best as a result of its release environment. Lynch and Frost, who lead the series, simply didn't know how to make it work as well as they did in the later years of their careers. And yet, despite a mountain of problems, the show somehow remained peak! One of the best parts about it is that the show was so prolific that in spite of its season 2 early cancellation, someone in the writing team knew a third season was going to be inevitable, so they had a character verbally say, "See you in 25 years, and then 25 years later, they got season 3 released with most of the original cast. That's absolutely bonkers! Besides that, as the huge fan of surrealism and abstract imagery that I am, the show made me so absolutely excited to see all of the weird shit that was going to happen. The Black Lodge scenes where the characters speak their lines backwards but then the scene is put backwards so they are speaking forwards is some incredible shit. I love the arm. I am a fan. It's this weird character that genuinely looks at the main character and says, "I am the arm and I sound like this." And that's actually his character introduction. I don't know who got high or if they are just good at making surrealism sober, but I am a fan. I am in that house like carpet. So, season 1 mostly revolves around the murder of a teenage girl called Laura Palmer. She is found in a plastic bag after being thrown down the river. Her hands have obvious tie marks, her body is ladled with bite marks, and she exhibits signs of having had sexual relationships hours before her death. But the weirdest piece of evidence? A single letter stuck far underneath her fingernail. A letter R. Naturally, the small town of Twin Peaks does not have the qualifications or the resources to solve such a murder, especially since the murderer shares similarities to a serial killer's MO, so they end up calling one Agent Cooper to town. Cooper's a blast, one of my favorite characters in mystery fiction because he goes around the investigation in a competitive way, while also being somewhat goofy. The paranormal events he experiences as he uncovers the true depth of the mystery never have him reacting illogically. The dreams aren't telling him what to do, they simply help him connect the pieces. Modern mystery shows with paranormal elements struggle with that, and this one doesn't. He also likes coffee and pie. That's like me. I am that guy, except an unpopular YouTuber instead of the most unflappable man around. The mystery then develops in super interesting ways, as we also get to see the way the town reacts to the murder, feeling unease they didn't feel before and trying to cover potential avenues that could make them suspicious, even if they are completely innocent. This makes the actual whodunit kind of fun. That said, this isn't a fair game mystery. You won't know who did it till the show wants you to, which is kinda lame, but normal for most mystery narratives. The actual subplots range in quality. For example, I really like everything with Audrey, and then there's Nadine's storyline where she goes cuckoo and starts trying to date children. I think it was meant to be somewhat comedic, but it wasn't even uncomfortable, I just couldn't get to care much about it, it had no effect. The only subplots that actually felt great were the ones directly related to the sheriff's department employees, but only watching these would easily remove 60% of the show, so The shine really comes when absurdism is pushed. The snippets of oddly uncomfortable scenes where characters evidently try to hide their emotions are a simple example. The cinematography around these actually feels interesting, and the editing gimmicks used to create the weirdness are simple ideas being executed well. Imagine I made one part of this video by playing all the sentences in the opposite order and then use editing to fix the words until they sound marginally off. That's the kind of tricks Lynch and Frost keep pulling off here. Particularly mildly and surreal undoubtedly, but complex not. As for the third season, you're off to a completely different thing. Season 1 and 2 kinda share themes, and you could even argue the first season's paranormal elements aren't actually paranormal in nature. The log lady's log can simply be the log of a crazy lady, and Cooper's dreams may just be his subconscious figuring stuff out. But the third season is created after the idea that you'll never get back what you missed. It holds off payoffs till the end of the season, as characters constantly break away from the nostalgic elements the first two seasons recurrently brought up, and the otherworldly is all but confirmed as part of the show. They bring the feel back of the first seasons at the very end, but most of the season is in part commentary of why the original series suffering from network interference is part of the final product's identity. I personally really enjoyed this third season because it kept the playfulness of the original but still was unexpectedly unsatisfying, which I see as a good thing. Somehow. Oh, also it has much better rhythm. All in all, a trill mix of nuts, crackers, and raisins that kinda fucking slap, but it can be a little jarring. I do think the show suffers from a few issues. Welcome to that part of the video where I force into the conversation a random show I love because something tangentially related to it came up. But JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 is somewhat related. It's a small town mystery, and the cool part of that universe is that the location in which the story happens, Mario, is tangible. Like, okay, I can't actually touch it though. I would adore to try the parfaits at the Higashikata Flute Parlor. I know, wrong part. But you get what I mean. It's tangible in its fictionality, which I also can't touch, so we're back at square one. God fucking damn it, I never get to touch any of the cool things I want to touch. Mario really tells you visually that it has a story and sets up where the events and the stories are happening as they happen in the series. Twin Peaks really loses so much immersion because not only does it never show a map, not even a shitty one like this one Lynch made, but it also refuses to show you the exterior of buildings. Only a handful of those are seen, and the framing is often really intrusive to the point I had to do a double take when I saw Lara outside of her house in the Fire Walk With Me movie. How does one fire walk? Setting your feet on fire after dipping them in gasoline? Now hold it, if you watched the show and seen it to the end, you probably know how this was justified and think I'm stupid. Don't worry, I realize, and that specific tidbit is absolutely fucking dope and I love it. But it doesn't off-put the fact that for the entirety of the original show, the location's portrayal isn't conducive to the world and story. Much like electricity to Keijo Nijimura's body, I just had a hard time getting into it enough to go deep into all of the cool little hints Season 3 creates towards a truly bizarre mystery! Too much JoJo, I'll stop it now. Big question, should you watch it? I say yes. Look, it's a weird show. You may find it generally boring if that isn't your thing, but if you come to me and tell me it's not genuinely fascinating, I'll call you an alien and kick your ass back to Mars. Even I was bored while they were doing some of the confusing surreal shenanigans I had to piece together after some of the episodes, but something this unique and specific does not happen every day, and then when you actually start looking further into it, you realize the writers truly did care about making something unlike anything you can find on TV. The surface value definitely has noticeable issues and age, but the lore behind the show is incredible. You can theorize about everything to surprising depths. Analysis of this show doesn't conclude with themes or messages, but rather with answers about the show's more obtuse secrets. It's fucking criminal that MatPat never did a film theory on this. I wanted to make a joke about some ridiculous film theory video, but I went to the channel and just saw the most depressing content spread. Almost all of the videos hinge on upcoming or current popular trends. And like, sure, game theories had always done this, but like, where's the soul? Every thumbnail is clickbait. This isn't the guy that said, fuck it, I'll cover FNAF and made it massive. This is Mr. Beast squirting over the videos and turning them into manufactured content designed to get clicks and nothing else. On that note about FNAF, the obtuse secrets are kinda like FNAF, so if you love making theories about FNAF, 100% get on Twin Peaks.
I sent 2 letters back in autumn, you must not have got them.
Familiarity is a special thing. It's also really fucking weird. And so, this 10-episode miniseries was designed around that weirdness and the normality it begets. But the Golden Wall follows 2 brothers, Rit and Greg, who cross over the titular wall and become lost in this strange unknown world, somewhere in the autumn woods where danger lingers and strange creatures abound. Beyond the actual nature of the location, the challenges it presents to the brothers are rooted in their exclusion from their natural environment. Wherever you look, the brothers encounter creepy environments, the nature is oftentimes off-putting, and the people act in bizarre, inexplicable ways. The world they are in is weird, tetric in a sense, and yet the people in it don't live any differently than the main duo back in their regular lives. Oh, also their frog is there, he's super important and like starts hanging around with them, 10 out of 10 character, he also sings the cool song. Well, it's true that humans adapt themselves to better fit their surroundings, but what's going on here is not that the inhabitants of this land show complacency. It's not just an inconvenience they've gotten used to. In a strange sense, many of them seem more than complacent. They seem content. That contentment is a major theme of this series. While Greg's purpose in the storyline is meant to represent some form of responsibility Rit must come to terms with, Rit's purpose beyond his arc is to express fear and confusion at the world he finds himself in part because Greg is too oblivious and too young to do that, but also because he operates under the idea that the unknown is inherently dangerous. He assumes everything is as it seems, swallowed by his preconceptions. And yet, despite all of the creepy and unusual things we have around, people who talk about the show often describe it as cozy. Against all odds, this makes perfect sense. Almost every episode shows a different side to every story. Episode 2 sees the brothers find a village filled with pumpkin citizens that seemingly praise a giant pumpkin in cult-like fashion. But at the end of the episode, it's shown that they never held any ill intention, happily dancing and letting the brothers and their cool frog leave. No better example of this exists than Beatrice. this blue bird that begins following them around and guides them in their journey. Rit is initially appalled by this worm-eating creature that is somehow capable of speech, and the bird herself isn't the nicest either, she's clearly hiding something. She may say she likes eating dirty maggots and wants to take the brothers to a helping fairy, but there's always more than the preconception. It's not correct to fill up the missing gaps of what you don't understand with assumptions and prejudice. This discussion about the dangers of patching up the unknown with senseless headcanons is pivotal to the story, and reiterated time and time again. After all, Rit's arc is about growing up, a form of unknown unto itself that uncovers the complexity of the world someone discovers while they are coming of age. The creepiness of this show is frankly understated for this very reason. They wanted to portray a common unknown for younger audience members in order to help them understand the broader message of the story, a message that is not often framed this way because adults having gone already through it don't always know how to communicate when fear is and isn't okay. Everyone, even children, go at their own pace. We need shows like this for that very reason. Not only are there big differences between people, but it's difficult to explain how one can come to accept life changes. Adapting is universal, but accepting, that's personal. Adapting to being an adult is a different thing than accepting what it entails. Again, it's in human nature to simply adapt and reconsider whenever our surroundings change. An adaptation is a process that can help humans accept that which they aren't familiar with, but it's not the entire process. You're more than a result of natural selection because your rational abilities come with a sense of personality, the formation of what it means to be you. It's not a mechanical process, but a personalized one designed by yourself to create purpose and raise above the unknown until it's, well, not quite familiar, just closer to it. Of course, this show has many examples of its citizens paralleling and supporting such a concept. They all come to their own sense of individuality and purpose, which they reiterate often as a way to turn the unknown not just into the known, but into familiarity. That's the core beauty of this show. This is a story about familiarity. The citizens of this place may live in a strange and unknown world, but at the end of the day, they came to terms with it and found ways to exist and thrive and be happy in that environment. Isn't it admirable to see all of these people rising up to the unknown so they can find some sort of happiness even in a place that should conventionally have none? Well, I don't think that's being frank. The unknown as a concept isn't a challenge to be defeated. It's unlike the goals we created by ourselves to simplify how we gauge progress. The unknown isn't a tool or obstacle after all, and I know this is kind of a redundant statement. We don't know what the unknown is. See, this show is no stranger to horror and death. Its off-putting portions are a result of its framing of the creatures as a creepy thing until they suddenly turn out to be good and everything is fine as it ever was, yippee! This story has a looming element of true unknown, a creature of some sort, an unsettling unknown that we cannot make assumptions about, our only option left being to fear it. Death is one such example. It is often brought up in this story, from creatures that come back to life after death to characters explaining a terrible loss they've suffered. I believe this was included here as a reminder that the unknown isn't that simple. Death is a form of unknown that by no means can become familiar to us. It simply exists as it weaves into our comforting familiarity, a trap symbol that fear of the unknown will be forever real. I mean, look at this story's main antagonist, a literal beast that lingers in the shadows and is only referred to in big speculation. It turns souls into the trees around the forest, providing souls a grieving father will chop and burn in order to keep the spirit of his daughter alive inside a little lantern. All the while he doesn't know these are people. And if he knew, what would he do? What would anyone do encountered with a realization of this magnitude? What are humans meant to do? Humans pretend. What is a purpose? What is a dream, if not a lie we tell to ourselves to feel like we understand that which we don't? Again, it's in the concept. The unknown is inevitable and ever-present. When it becomes known, then it is out of our minds. In a roundabout way, what becomes familiar to us about the unknown is precisely its presence. The excuses we make do not let the fear about it control us, and slowly, we forget. We begin to not wonder if whatever lies beyond the garden wall is a limbo, or a dream, or a story. We only pretend that it is happening, and that it is beautiful. I mean, sure, we do think about the nature of the world within the show, same way we ponder death and the afterlife for real, but in a shocking expression of thematic compliance, the show manages to make its creepy unknown appear familiar. It proves its own thematic point by throwing you into the story of these brothers and this perpetual world filled with yellows and oranges that are beautiful, as the legitimacy of the actual events fades into the background, and what begins to matter is the acceptance of what may very well be a lie. That it's okay not to know everything and sometimes even rely on that familiarity. Maybe today we aren't eating worms and dirt, but we're so used to eating untasty musty dirt. We might as well just call it that.
Now eat your dirt.
Yeah, I cooked with that little essay, but let's break that prose and just go back to my crappy commentary. Big question, should you watch it? Yes, I went for an essay because the actual review is everything is compelling and well made. The entire show is a little under 2 hours long and it's absolutely perfect as a miniseries. There is no universe where you actively lose from watching this show, and I firmly believe that.
Dude, those animals are so fucking funny, they make me want to merge without looking!
In the actual top 10, Over the Golden Wall is actually number 8. The real numbers 6 and 7 are the ones I'm skipping over cause otherwise this video would be less fun. At number 6 we got Samuel. This show is kinda difficult to watch because it's blocked almost everywhere. Its score is high although it's only got like 600 reviews, and it's also completely in French. Sure, I could download it and try to understand it, but my French is not nearly that good and there's no comfortable way to see it with subtitles, so fuck you, you don't get to be watched by me at this moment. Number 7 is actually just the first season of this entry, Planet Earth 1. I decided to only watch the second season because otherwise this would be like 9 shows instead. The second season has better ratings and is regarded higher. Whenever someone's whining like, oh, if Earth was so good, why doesn't it have a sequel? You can bring this one up and destroy them internally. This is my little break. This is the show I've got very little to say about because it's just a straight up documentary, meaning there's no themes or characters to discuss, just a straight up, good old face value show. Which is like fine, I guess. You know when you go to Walmart or whatever large retailer that sells electronics and they put 120 FPS footage of highly curated nature videos to make the TVs appear more impressive than they actually are? This is literally that documentary series, except you also get this chill-ass narration by David Attenborough that, in tandem with the editing, extrapolates stories from the everyday happenings of these animal species all throughout the different habitats of the world. Ironically, it's not green, it's very well made. Instead of aiming for a simple documentary like,
and here we have this snake who is about to go to bed. Observe as it sheds its skin like the reptilians we're gonna feature in this 3 AM History Channel show.
They purposefully reordered the footage with narrative storytelling in mind. What could have been random footage of a sloth is edited to make it seem like this big journey for the little guy, crossing over the habitat in search for something important, nay, elemental to life. Pussy. You have to admit that all of this is beautifully shot and edited. The absolute detail you get to see thanks to modern photography and the many techniques they've figured out to get undisturbed footage of wildlife in super specific situations is incredible. Look at the scaly height on these Komodo dragons crashing into each other, that's like genuinely impressive to behold. But that's just it. It's just a documentary and I was bored by it. It's not that they didn't try, it's that this is a documentary and thus not something I can actually dissect in a fictional analysis setting, you know, which is the thing I actually enjoy doing here. I also really enjoy analyzing game design, but I don't think that applies in this case, unless, what if they did like a segment on deer, would that count technically? Even then, as a documentary, the subject matter is simply the concept of animals in their habitats doing animal things. Inject all the narrative you wish to, the fact of the matter is, I didn't find the show engaging at all. If you want, you can blame it on the newer generation and their TikTok brains, which would certainly be easier, but that's pretending there is any depth to this beyond it looking pretty. It's not like I hated everything. I thought the last episode going over animals in cities actually paid off, and every episode did have a small portion at the end where they featured the documentary crew gathering all the footage they needed. Slime, this was way more interesting than some well-edited footage of some iguanas running away from snakes. I want to talk about this scene. For some reason, too many reviews of this show feature it like it's some sort of magnum opus of cinema, even though it's just 2 minutes of repurposed footage. Sure, they arranged them to follow a standard narrative with racing and fall intention, but I don't see how it's any better than what any fictional show can do. The complexity of the storylines are either animal want fight for food or animal want fight for sex. It's like that's just lost and the show got critically panned so hard most people don't even remember the ending they were angry about. To me, it reads like Planet Earth 2 is popular because someone called it so, rather than because it breaks the mold in any regard that isn't technical. Big question! Should you watch it? I'm gonna tell you to do a hard pass on this one, unless you are a fan of photography or have any interest in biology. At the end of the day, this show is informative, but I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if it was more concise. There's some stuff you can get out of this if you're a fan of the areas this show excels at, but if you're someone who prefers the magic of fictional storytelling, you won't get anything of value here. Like, I want to say more about it, but there really is nothing, and I've already overextended myself about this one.
Now you must acquire a taste for freeform jazz.
Oh no. Since the second I saw this was in the top 10, I was immediately worried. My thoughts on Cowboy Bebop aren't exactly as positive as they tend to be for most people. It's true I've already called great shows people loved agreeable in this video already, I think. Actually not, this is the first time I put the word in the script. The word I've said the most, by the way, is about, probably due to the Dekalog part using the word as a joke. Still, Cowboy Bebop is not like other shows. It has got to be one of the few shows that genuinely makes people confused when they hear my rating of it. It's near and dear to so many people, and some have even gotten upset about my opinions on it. Here, from the bowels of my Animalist account, which you should check out in the background just to feel disgusted at some of my tastes. 7 out of 10. Overrated and boring. Last 4 episodes or so are spectacular though. And you know, that sums up my opinions pretty well, though I do think it sounds way more pessimistic as a result, so let me extend on those thoughts. This show's about a group of bounty hunters in space who are in sci-fi space, and they do spacey stuff and catch criminals from space. That's the storyline, but there's obviously a lot more to it. Each of the 4 main characters gets their own bits of backstory and characterization. You got a hard-boiled ex-cop with dumb facial hair, Miss Amnesia, techno-transgender question mark, that guy from Mario, or the smartest dog in the fucking world, or galaxy. I don't know why they gave out this detail, it's completely irrelevant aside for like 3 jokes, though I admit one of those jokes still makes me laugh. Visually, the show is clearly from 1998, the animation doesn't always look perfect, and you can see the production pain shows from that time often ran into, but not only is that cool in its own way, the actual look of the anime is absolutely vibes. Thing is, their actual memorability isn't anything from another world. Shows simply were hand-drawn and painted at this time, which is what creates this washed-out melancholic look and strange color palettes that had to account for the way they look once the actual drawings were captured and sequenced. A ton of anime from 98 look exactly like this. Here's this niche space-themed anime called Outlaw Star that aired like 3 months before, and you can see the same vibes, which is why I don't love it when people bring them up to explain why the show is good. That's like saying you like a specific soup because it's made out of liquids. And now I'm reading the script where I gave a film reference, but I wrote some bullshit on resolutions, even though old films were recorded on film and thus they don't care about your stupid digital pixels. These show's visuals have a lot more going for them than just colors and drawings. I never hear praise for the abundance of wide shots during fight scenes as a striking visual element, or how the more emotional scenes are timed. Though pretty drawings make for a nicer visual, animation is still just moving stuff around and timing it to something. And I don't like that Bebop is seen as a lo-fi music video resource instead. Some people also seem to forget that the animation isn't as pretty during the crux of the series. It starts well and picks up near the end, but besides action scenes, they clearly showed constraints. That's kind of a minor thing that doesn't really matter. The animation here is a 9 out of 10, but as much as anime fans like using the animation as their single argument to explain why their anime was cool, this is not the only positive or negative thing Cowboy Bebop is working with. The main issue I find with Cowboy Bebop is slightly more fundamental. I'm talking about its episodic nature. Most of the runtime is completely unmemorable. Of the 26 episodes, only like 12 made me perk up in anticipation. There's episodes which are incredible, such as episode 7, that despite holding almost no plot relevance, I still really felt compelled by the characters and their philosophies. Many people— wait, did I just say characters again? No, I'm reverting! No! I still felt compelled by the characters and their philosophies, though a lot of people really say this episode is one of the worst, so I may be biased. I feel like it merits at least a shout out for my part. There's also the episode where they play Super Mario in real life and get sunk out on their minds. That episode's also great. But there's also many episodes that just kinda go by. They may have extremely well animated action scenes, but they provide no reasons to care, no reasons to remember them. One of the characters that's introduced in episode 10, Ed, brings so much life to the episodic stuff, so that just means that 4 or 5 of the first 9 episodes are just kind of a chore to get through on a first watch. And then you get to the story episodes, that's where the real meat of the show is. If it didn't include so many of the boring ones, I'd totally rate this higher because I absolutely adore it when the show actually gets going. Delving into the main characters' backstories, not you Ed, you really feel the genius behind the writing, not you Ed and Jet. They may encounter tropes, yes you Spike and Jet, but at least they are all impactful in some way. Fine, I'll give you this one Ed. I was a bit bothered in the past by how much the music carries the show, but the music itself isn't manipulatively blunt. In fact, the show has an incredible soundtrack. I can sing the entirety of the ending theme, though badly. Slime, it's gotta be one of my favorite anime EDs, which yes, I brought 2 of my favorite anime EDs in this video. That's Suki from Kamanosomi and the real Fuck Blues from Cowboy Bebop. The first episode sets the tone more than well. The flashback episodes near the middle may not be the most interesting or unique, but they certainly build off intrigue. And then the last 4 episodes along with the mid-series arc, those are infinitely deserving of the acclaim the show gets. Faye's character is my favorite, because unlike the rest of the cast where what you see is what you get, except for the situation with Ed's gender, Faye showcases a lot more complexity than the rest as a result of her demeanor not being her personality. Like, Jet is the hard-boiled detective one, so he only does things you'd expect from a character like him. Spike himself also suffers from this. There's no surprises with these two, they act like they look, and they look like a result of their backstory. Turn to Faye's characterization, where because of her arc surrounding amnesia, you get to see 4 separate versions of her throughout her life that genuinely had me amazed. You see both her personal and social personalities of both before and after the amnesia. I genuinely can't think of any other show that seriously explores what would happen if an amnesiatic person remembers their past only to realize they're now a different person. No fucking way JoJo's about to show up again, but the only other show I thought that does this is Part 8. So that's kinda what it comes down to. In fewer words, Cowboy Bebop to me felt like a series that drags out its plot through slightly entertaining but ultimately wasted episodic stories.
I think I just sound rough on it, especially because of the disdain I've encountered from people whenever I mention I thought it was just fine.
It's like I'm trying to defend my point when I really shouldn't even need to, and that kinda ties back to why I stopped covering anime in this channel. People just get oddly defensive when you say something popular is not really that good, unless it's Demon Slayer apparently, which is also pretty iffy, so I understand it, except for the Upper Moon 1 fight. I actually like that one. If I say Frieren is so-so and has horrible world building, I get shit. If I say I refuse to read One Piece, I get shit. If I say Your Name cruises on its pretty animation despite having dog shit plot, I get shit. If I say I like Vinland Saga Season 2 way more than the first because the first is too blunt and doesn't convey the feel of its time frame, I get shit. But if you hear me say I thought ID Invaded was one of the best sci-fi anime ever, or that Sukuna of Rise and Ruin has had one of the most emotional anime episodes of all time, or that Fully Coolly Alternative holds a candle to the original, or that the Magical Girl Rising Project is edgy but a genuine nail-biting experience with an excellent antagonist, you will look at me dead in the eyes and give me shit! On that note, watch Apocalypse Hotel. It's rather recent and it's one of my favorite anime of recent memory. Please, it's so good. Alright, I'll continue ranting about anime in a later segment. For now, big question. Should you watch it? Hey, if there's something I can recognize, it's when my opinion is an exception to the rule. I don't think the show is incredible and groundbreaking, a masterwork of some kind, but I've seen way too many people say they absolutely adore it. It's not a shallow show by any means, which means that if you find it entertaining, you're gonna adore it. Even if the vibes are a result of its release window, if you think they're pretty, you're gonna adore it. Even if the characters are trophy, if you find them compelling, you're gonna adore it. And so on and so forth. This is an anime that has everything it needs to succeed and I'm just not the audience member for it. It's a me skill issue and I absolutely think it deserves a watch. Worst case scenario, you join the Rabbit Idiot Club with me. And best case scenario, you get a piece of entertainment you'll hold dear forever. So yeah, fuck everything I said here, go watch it and make your own opinion after this video. And you can also watch my other amazing videos afterwards. What YouTube's done to me is a fucking insult. Did you note that I have not used the word about at all since I talked about it? And now, show is the most common word I've spoken today.
I am a surgeon! I am a surgeon!
I think it was a wise one who encountered a nameless monster. It implored to her. Miss Popstar, please give me your name, said the monster. I can't give you my name, replied the Popstar. If you give me your name, I'll go inside you and make you strong, said the monster. Really? Asked the Popstar. If you make me stronger, I'll give you my name. The monster licked his lips, said to her, Girl, you look good enough to eat, and went into the Popstar. And so, the monster became Lady Gaga. Gaga was the best singer in town. But then one day she said, Look at me! Look at me! The monster inside me is getting bigger! Munch munch, chomp chomp, gobble gobble, gulp. He ate her heart. He ate Gaga's heart from the inside out. Monster is genuinely an incredible piece of TV and animation, particularly the writing. It's about a spectacular surgeon from Japan, Tenma, who encounters a moral dilemma that's not entirely rare or undiscussed. He's got 2 patients. One is the most important man in town, we're talking the mayor himself, out cold in the other room. The other one is a 10-year-old boy who got there first. Tenma is genuinely on another level. He would easily save both of the lives. However, while someone else trying to save the mayor would have a 30% chance of failure, the kid is over 95% likely to die unless Tenma performs the operation, as the kid was shot directly in the head. Divided by both his morals and the affirmation that the hospital's administration would fast-track him up the ladder if he chooses to save the mayor, even though he got there second, Tenma decides to save the kid. As he doesn't believe any life has more value than another, it should have been fair. That is the biggest mistake Tenma will ever make. So as it turns out, the hospital stuns his career, cockblocks his ass, and also it turns out the kid, Johan, has serious sociopathy issues that result in Tenma being framed for the murder of the people who made his life miserable, which sends him on the run. To avoid spoilers, I'll leave the plot summary there, also because summaries suck. But I think you can already see all of this making an interesting show. Just in its premise, it's promising to discuss morality, it's gonna feature a chase, the main character is gonna be super smart, there's gonna be a mystery, and you just know stuff will be said about Germany's situation during World War II, since it's happening in Germany. It's super interesting, and the extended cast of characters that grow out of it are both super complicated and well executed, particularly in the way they discuss what a monster even is. As the plot unravels, every major character gets more information that recontextualizes their morality, which is nothing new when it comes to showing why bad actions don't make bad people, but this show also has the goal to tug at the edges of what humans call morality. One such example is the way Tenma's attitude towards killing and saving is explored.
He has a very strict no murder policy, and any action that he takes which is slightly morally charged leaves him in complete shambles. Typically not killing anyone is seen as a good thing, but this story is clearly taking the Batman route.
You know how everyone makes fun of Batman for not killing the Joker as that results in the death of even more people, which is negligent of other lives at the very least? Well, Tenma is really just a doctor. He doesn't struggle with not killing as much as he struggles with doing the killing. He's a softie like that, just a squishy little guy. How much should someone stick to their morals, and what defines whether a person is allowed to break away from that morality? This may be the exact question Monster asks amidst its drama, and I absolutely adore that it doesn't really try to answer this question. It's more about giving you food for thought. At the end of the series, it's up to you to decide who actually is the monster or not, whether it's because they make no exceptions to their morals, or because their morals are based on flawed presumptions. It's some exceptional character writing. My favorite has got to be Wolfgang Grimmer. If I ever have a kid, I'm naming him Wolfgang after him, but I'm not likely to have kids due to my pockets being as empty as the praise for Swans as a band. Grimmer is just a ray of sunlight of the most interesting nature on this show, in a way that almost encompasses the broader messages of it. It's really hard to talk about it without spoilers, but his character discusses how morality and psychology have a connection but do not overlap. The more you get to know about him, and his goddamn smile and his little bag that probably holds some unhinged shit, the more amazing his conviction and determination becomes. He's also got multiple mysteries attached to him, which just makes him a character you'll think about constantly. So, as you can tell, all the writing elements are more than perfect. Even if in my opinion the ending is kind of unsatisfying, I still think it works exceptionally well for the overall style and message of the show, a style of writing that's entertaining and allows the viewer to draw their own conclusions, which makes it absolutely lovely to watch. The caveat here is that it's also kinda hard to really pinpoint the quality of your interpretation. My take on it was an exploration of human morality, but someone could very well see it as a story that primarily condemns the way success is waged by the broader society, and they wouldn't be wrong. Same thing if they interpret the story to be about love, even though there's few romantic story beats. The lens by which you look at each character can severely impact your perception of the text. I understand Johan to be a character with intrinsically flawed morality and genuine malicious intent, incapable of setting aside his own experience for the sake of a less absolute form of morality. But I've seen people argue that from his perspective, he never did anything truly immoral, not in the sense that he never killed and committed other crimes, but more so in the sense that the rationale behind his actions checks out. Straight up, look at Tenma. I see him to be some sort of foil to Johan, as he is also incapable of setting aside his own experience for the sake of his absolute form of morality. He simply saves people instead. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not an absolute for either character, since they do undergo an arc that evidences their flaws in their ideals and changes their perspective throughout the series, but I think that's all part of the genius. I doubt the author didn't intend for something specific, but I'm also certain the author expects the viewer to come to their own conclusion regardless of any of the writing. Well, now it's time to be a bitch about it. It does stop being as impressive when you walk away from those elements. Monster is an animated show, but it doesn't really have anything that pushes the medium. A live-action Monster series would probably be better and receive a way wider audience, though as I understand it, there were attempts to make it and simply fell through due to Urasawa's insistence on having a full script before agreeing to the production, which never happens in Hollywood, but absolutely fair. Urasawa is the creator of Monster, by the way. I almost forgot to say that. The animation is honestly not impressive, and sure, you can complain about that, but it's really not a story that needs good animation. I think the decision of which cuts to use and when are a lot more important for a story that's going all in on the writing. The visuals take second fiddle and work best when they highlight the writing or provide extra context.
That means the art is kinda whatever.
I feel like a lot of the story could have taken advantage of the medium to make things that were animated pretty straightforwardly into outstanding moments. There's this location called the Red Rose Mansion in the story, and it's supposed to be a murder house that just looks abandoned and innocuous from the outside, even wiped clean from the inside, yet whenever you see characters inside, they just kind of exist in it. There's no real weight to the location, seeing as the framing of most cuts simply involves the character standing there or shots of the floor looking perfectly orderly. The animation only communicates the text or the emotions of the characters, and the whole tone of each scene is set by the soundtrack instead. Which, by the way, the soundtrack is monstrously good. Once again, everything in this list has great soundtracks for some reason, but I do wish the animation would pull more of its weight in this case. Like, come halfway through the show, and Tenma's character design doesn't really portray any progression. It genuinely feels like he's stumped on something that should have had an obvious answer for way too long, because they don't really portray how trapped he feels around trying to accomplish his objective. It can get a little tiring to see him unless you keep reminding yourself of the events that made him brood in the corner all day. The pacing isn't bad, but the sense of progression that the writing manages to convey is not paralleled by what is actually on the screen. I reiterate, the show doesn't really need that, and I scored it a 9 out of 10, but I can't deny it doesn't have things that keep it from being the best it could be. Big question, should you watch it? Yes. Although it's a little on the long side and does have mistakes, I would never tell anyone they shouldn't watch it. This was like the kind of show where you'd hear people make an argument that it's not a show for you if you're not willing to draw your own conclusion from its depth, as if it's too mature or deep for some people's understanding, but I always find shows that only work through interpretation to be a slight bit pretentious. I don't get that from here. I can see people not liking it or taking away little to nothing, but both its entertainment value and potential to resonate with the viewer is high. That also means that I respect if anyone feels like this show has too much stuff to analyze and not enough to entertain, because there were moments where I totally thought that too. There's definitely bits that add very little and arcs that drag on more than necessary. That is to say, I completely agree with this being in Letterboxd top 5. It does unarguably showcase how morality looks like when successfully explored in fictional media. That's not to say I wouldn't agree with any other 30 shows being here, but this is certainly a good one to have.
Go!
The final anime of this video. It's actually one of the first anime a lot of people watched, and for good reason. I think Fullmetal Alchemist is a perfect example of a perfectly agreeable anime. Not in the sense that it's just okay, but in the sense that most people who watch it tend to really like it. I also adore that it has every element you can expect from an anime. The power scaling, world building, character arcs, plot reveals, fight scenes, antagonists, magic systems, even the dramaticism is perfect for someone who is not familiar with how anime works and is looking to try it out. This is kind of the reason the show got such fame for being that bitched, you know, at the top of my anime list and whatnot. Of course, the actual content of the show is awesome and great and all, insanely memorable considering it's one of those shows I saw a long time ago and remember it better than some shows I watched for this marathon. But the reason people crown this as the best in the past is just to give new viewers a good show to access anime from. I guess the more new fans have gotten into anime, the more of a competition it has become between shows. Everybody knew like 6 or 7 years ago that Fullmetal Alchemist wasn't really going to be the objective best show or their favorite. There's tons of animes and shows that are better for a bunch of reasons, like imagine Gintama. It's one of my favorite animes ever and easily beats the big 3 on my list, but I would never recommend it to someone who has not seen at least like 30 shows of varying genres. Gintama simply hinges a lot of the comedy it relies upon to be making fun of anime, so it's not the best recommendation for a first-time viewer. Right now, Frieren is number 1 on Mal, and though I can easily see someone preferring it over FMA, Frieren doesn't have nearly the same range of elements to get someone into anime as Fullmetal, unless you know they are gooners, in which case go in. And I guess that's something that kinda bothers me. At some point the way people rated anime became a direct representation of how good it supposedly is, but that's kind of an awful approach to media. Not to say there's no way to make objectively better products when it comes to TV, animation and video games. You could always improve on technical aspects or write clearer, but you will never be able to directly correlate objective superiority with subjective superiority, as in a person's opinion. I enjoy cleanly written stories that are constantly entertaining and not afraid to get weird, but that doesn't mean everyone should prefer those elements in their favorite pieces of media, and that's precisely what I think went wrong with the way anime is consumed in recent years. It's no longer about having a show like Fullmetal Alchemist that can easily convince someone to delve into other shows. Ratings are no longer a way to come up with a consensus. Instead, it's become this weird fight to justify that whatever you're watching is the best thing ever, the objective bee's knees. I see people watching Chainsaw Man, and instead of discussing the actual content of the story, they are discussing if it's better or worse than Bocce the Rock. Same way I see people look at Frieren and think it's simply the label of best anime ever made instead of the many cool messages and themes of the work. Sure, in this video I kinda am rambling on about ratings and scores, but that's in the devil of the concept. I've been trying to give reviews that aren't so much about what I like and dislike, but more about what someone could like or dislike, and Fullmetal is to me a great example of a show that has mostly things to like. It's run of the mill in that sense, but it also stood as this example of a great introductory anime for so long that it slowly lost that value and became simply some sort of creature whose defeat would prove once and for all that someone's opinion is in fact more pig than the other guys. Because that's really how anime rankings feel now, and one of the things that are making this video so different and varied, Letterboxd users don't have elitism around the scoring of a show. Not enough users actually care if they see Midnight Gospel on the top 100 even if it's only the 48th worst thing in Netflix's animated catalog, because scores are just opinions. Who cares if Sopranos has a higher IMDb score? Yes, it's deserved, but I'm still gonna fuck to every song in the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend soundtrack regardless of its 7.9. Look back to anime and people are fighting over whether Jujutsu Kaisen or Solo Leveling is the best thing in the world that deconstructs all the tropes even though they're basically the same style of show and do rely on tropes. Tropes are silly and repetitive and can make shows more predictable, less interesting, but that doesn't mean everyone should hate the shows just because they have tropes. On the contrary, it should be a perfectly respectable opinion for someone to enjoy a show even if they have tropes because maybe they just fuck with the tropes, like I fuck with this little guy from City whom I've been obsessed with for the last 5 weeks. It's come to the point where I see great shows have mediocre reviews just because they're not supposed to be rated higher than what show that's supposed to be rated higher. And that amount of hate and the pure overimportance I wanted to ratings has made discussion of the shows way less common. The show has to be a pond of metaphors like Sonny Boy in order to get any attention of that kind. An editor that used to explore the medium was spaced out for a focus on the blatant stuff like a show's amount of hype moments, frames, or how it compares to the other popular show. Critical discussion of the writing has been turned into some sort of attack on people who like it. It's reductive, boring, and it absolutely sucks, particularly in the content space. Where's the fun in explaining why something everyone thinks is good is in fact very, very good? And that's why I'm not doing anime content anymore. Phew! That was a script that was long overdue. Great that I can hide it in the middle of this seemingly unrelated video. And if you're still paying attention, you have no idea how much I appreciate you hanging around with me. I hope you're having fun with my video. Here, as a reward, you get to listen to my normal, relaxed voice. And now that that's out of my system, let me give you a brief review of this show, which is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, you know, the thing we're here to see after this commercial break.
Fullmetal Alchemist.
Fullmetal Alchemist! So Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is a remake of an older anime, and it follows two brothers who are alchemists. Alchemy in this world is a magic system that allows people with the ability to change one thing from another as soon as its equivalent, and it can range from simple transmutation of one material into another, all the way to trying to revive your dead mom by doing taboo alchemy. And so the brothers did, and that was at the cost of an arm and a leg, and also the small detail of the other guy's entire body. Small blunder, but yeah, that's why he's an armor, not just because it's fucking raw, but because his soul spirit was forced to get in there all snuggly to survive. The story takes place in the continent of Amstris. I think that's the name, let me check. It's Amestris, like a mistress. Point is, the nation becomes under attack by a group of super strong artificial life forms created by alchemy, and the government asks for the brothers' talent in defending the nation. Meanwhile, they'll attempt to resolve their unimportant missing a whole body situation by finding the Philosopher's Stone. No, not the philological stone from Harry Potter, though I am sure they're best of the same folklore or whatever, but this magical red stone that basically allows for an alchemist's power to be severely enhanced, and also we don't entirely know how it's made. So that's just the synopsis, and let's see what we have. A power system in alchemy. Amestris allows for the world building of this continent's politics and layout as well as a bunch of other shit. There's multiple groups in place such as the Brothers, the Homunculi, and the government's military, all which have different objectives and goals throughout the story, which also hints heavily at both inter-character arcs and plot-relevant arcs. In just explaining the synopsis, you can see how dense with cool elements this story is, and I haven't even talked about the secondary characters or even what each antagonist is like. It's a show that quickly gets to the point with everything it has, which makes it an ideal candidate for someone's first anime. but it also makes it likely to create this intrigue necessary for someone to stick around for a little bit longer. And of course, the execution follows suit in quality. By episode 12, you should already have seen some great setups and arcs that are bound to happen and keep things interesting as the stakes get higher. It's got 64 episodes in total, and by the end you're so familiar with the world and characters that you can't help but think it's kind of awesome. You know what else is awesome? I'm talking about the production of the show, from having iconic openings to really great animation that has, okay, admittedly aged. Quick ranking of those! The worst one's the fourth one. I don't really like it, it kinda doesn't fit the show, it's kinda random, kinda generic, it's not really that catchy, and I also really don't like it when he says we should sue gay men. Am I getting Mandala'd, or do I... Second worst, the second one. It's not that notable, but I do actually think it's pretty catchy once you actually get to know it. Also, I like the animation when they're fighting in the chorus part. It's like, and it's really cool. Third best is number 5, Rain. Notice the completely unsubtle change of phrase to make you feel like I'm more positive than I was before. Really dig how this one was completely unexpected for me the first time I watched it. I thought it was gonna be like the most epic and best and most energetic opening yet, but it was like super tragic and grey and stuff. The song is great and the visuals are great. I love all the characters, how they look in this opening like they're on the last stand, which is actually what's happening on the episodes you're gonna be watching along with this opening. But I also really like that all of the opening is really grey, and then at the end you get a lot of sunshine in the imagery. Like sunshine came through at the very end, and it's kind of pretty and nice. Also, it has a boob jump scare. Number 2, I'm putting the first one, not only because it's iconic, but also because it's pretty good. Yeah, sure, maybe the visuals don't have that many metaphors, but they're still pretty pretty to look at, except for these flowers in this scene. There's also this part where the guys are getting their bodies removed with the music, and then this girl shows up like doing a little bit of hula. Girl, who do you think you are? Get the heck out of here, you're not them, you will never be them. But yeah, the action scenes are great, and I also really like that shot at the very beginning that looks completely wrong without the context of the show, and once you actually have that context, it's like, oh, I see what this is, I see what's going on. Really clever. And number 1 is Golden Time Lover. I know, it's the weird one, but what can I say? I always love the little weird openings that are like musically strange, and this one is certainly musically strange. Not only that, but the visuals are made to be like this, going in and out, and like a bunch of tracking shots that are pretty ambitious. But not just that, I also really like the metaphor. I really like that he slams his hand and then like saves the little flower, and then they use this as a little bit of a bookend, which is also awesome. And not to mention the fact that this is by far the one that has the most metaphors and the most thematic cohesion with like the color palette and whatnot. I don't know, I'm into it. But yeah, the animation is clearly a thing of its time. It doesn't do whatever's happening in some newer things like Dadadan, and in fact there's moments where the 2009-ness is super evident. But to make it up to you, we do have that funny scene with the buff guys greeting each other in the manly way, like clasping hands. I want them to crush me like that. I don't want to discuss more of what's good and what's bad, because I don't really want to overhype anyone. This isn't like a magnum opus of television and anime, but everything it does pretty well. It's the density of elements that I'm here to praise the most, rather than their execution. The show has flaws, some evident, some less so. Some characters really don't develop as nicely as a lot of people remember, because they are stuck in the void of one character trait conforming 60% of their psychology and development. But again, that doesn't matter when the whole presentation is a mountain of extremely well executed things, essential to any piece of fictional storytelling. As a fan of fiction, I can't help but get giddy around all of its bits and bobs, but as a smaller fan of analysis, I do hit a wall. This show is more entertaining than it is deep, and while to me that's a flaw, it's one of those flaws I imagine is perfectly fine for a ton of people. It isn't like there's no depth to what it is and says. It talks about some clear stuff such as equivalent exchange, the rules of that, and the way humans are sometimes an exception. But watching the show, it doesn't really fulfill you in that sense. The beauty and highlights of Fullmetal Alchemist are all in the fictional character writing as delivered by the show. Roy Mustang, this guy. His storyline is not that heavy loaded thematically. There's certainly a huge change in him that you see throughout the show, where he starts super enthusiastic and confident, falls into cynicism and anger later on, which is exacerbated by a complete loss of confidence, and comes back to that early enthusiasm once he matures and redefines his values and goals around that. Nothing from another world, just exactly what character development should be. Well, I guess it is from another world, it's from the world of Amestris, but pretend I didn't say anything stupid. Roy's equivalent exchange throughout the show isn't nearly as pronounced as it is with the other characters, but that's not really what matters. The character shines most when dramatic tension hits the fan, and his competency becomes a satisfying display of badassness. He is not just the badassness that gives him the title of this guy, but what you'll remember about him won't be his struggle. You're gonna remember when he gets angry and turns a guy into rotisserie chicken multiple times in a row. Fuck, now I'm envious about it and everything, I wanna! And that rule kinda follows suit with most characters and plot developments. There's a lot of content dedicated to each that despite not being too deep, it's certainly both entertaining as fuck and not entirely devoid of that extra spicy sauce that makes the characters feel realistic and well-rounded. Insert joke about gluttony being well-rounded. I once heard someone say they are hear me out because they never saw the show, and I had to stop them right there because I can look past the eating people part, but I draw the line at the personality.
I don't know why I told you this. I guess I just want to embarrass my pal.
Big question. Should you watch it? I'm doing that thing that they did a lot in 2021 because it was popular. It's been so long, you guys. That's right, clapping just made me upset. Yes, you should watch Fullmetal Brotherhood, especially if you're new to anime. But if you're not, this is still a classic you should consider watching. It's just a very complete product that may not be your favorite, but you're almost guaranteed to enjoy it. It being at the top of Letterboxd is weird, but I think it probably is just a side effect of its position on Mal's top. As I said during the first part of the segment, the high score has big ties to the show's notoriety for being a baseline example of a fantastic anime, so I'm not sure how much of this rating is the result of the show's actual performance and how much is due to the bandwagoning. I can see it happening both ways though. Oh yeah, and don't let me forget the show has probably the most gruesome death of any dog in the list, and then it starts speaking about the Versailles Treaty or whatever, I don't know, I never learned how to speak. Who cares, it's time to do number 1!
War has changed.
Hey, it's the show about the Jonas Brothers! I didn't know they went to World War II! What? What do you mean it's about a company from World War II? What do you mean I look up the synopsis and this joke showed up as the first Google review? It's a show about a belt by a fashion brand named D2. Yeah. This is too much of a deep cut to be as funny as the Jonas Brothers joke, isn't it? I am the last person who would be a fan of war and military stories. I don't like them. Even ones like Full Metal Jacket, which attempt even more aggressively to deconstruct and portray war as the negative fuck it is. It's not the propagandistic elements or subject matter that bother me. In fact, this show is refreshingly aware of how patriotism and war mix poorly. It's more so that I can never really get into it. I think this has a lot to do with how all the characters have to wear uniforms because otherwise it would be stupid and unrealistic and ruin the fucking point, and thus, I don't know who anyone is anytime unless they explicitly say their name in the dialogue. I don't know why this happens, I don't have prosopagnosia, but I swear I can't differentiate faces properly. It's a real issue and it hits me more when watching this kind of show. Therefore, I think it does say something really positive that I actually managed to get into this show. Even though I didn't always get behind every scene, I did end up immersed in the world and drama. It feels very authentic from the production elements, the technology on display to the incredible performances by the cast. It manages to feel like a great recreation of something I've obviously never seen firsthand.
You know, the biggest war I've seen happening in real time is the Mycelium War. For real, everything feels super authentic, and that's an achievement unto itself, but pretty doable. We do have the ability to see the clothing, vehicles and weapons used during the war in the current day and age. I bet there's tons of museums with authentic rifles and helmets and whatnot. Even the environments can be pretty simple to recreate since they are just camps in the middle of a forest, which I'm pretty sure looked about the same in 2001 as they did in the 40s. Do gotta mention the town of Quarantine in its mid-battlefield state is a pretty nifty reconstruction. Who knows how it fares against the real deal, but I dig it.
The real impressive part to me though is the fact that they accurately managed to recreate the actions of the characters who are based on real people. Of course they got to ask everyone who survived about the events they experienced as part of E-Company in order to make the story feel even more authentic, and a lot of the actors surprisingly do pull the feelings off, to the extent that a few characters do manage to effectively deliver emotional moments to their full potential. Despite not being a fan of this particular niche, I actually got into the storyline of several characters. Then there's the parts I'm not so sure about, primarily that the characters don't really have enough substance since there's no writer that can add more where necessary. It's based on real things and thus feels more like a historical record. And even looking at that though, well, I don't know if the army ranks as seen in the show are representative of the real deal. I certainly do feel like the dialogue was written more carefully so no one would talk to their higher-ups funny like in other military shows I've seen, but I'm not at all aware of how the army worked back then. Much less about how many times the chain of command wasn't respected. I am sure stressful moments definitely incur an amount of insubordination that I imagine wouldn't easily come to the screen if it's not important, particularly because these people were trained to not be insubordinate. Who cares? This is not about the daily life of the soldiers, it's more about all the larger operations they took part in. And that's the other big no-no for me.
Any combat scene is kinda mega boring, which is unsurprising considering the action was mostly undercover gunfights. This makes perfect sense, the writers clearly aimed for an amount of realism, so breaking away from that would break the immersion and turn the story into a fantasy, which it fundamentally isn't. As a Way Show once said, real life fighting is awkward, it's not like movie fighting. But yeah, That made action scenes way less exciting. If a character dies during one, it's probably because someone in real life threw a bad order and got the guy killed and everyone was like, fuck, not that guy, this sucks, I have 12 new traumas now. But all the dramaticism it could have is kinda thrown out the window. Added to how it's difficult to know who even got shot unless they specifically say their name, like, no, Percante! Actually, I think that's the only one who didn't get shot. No, wait, he's the guy who got shot in the ass!
Miss.
There's also nothing such as rhythm or choreography, just realistic shoot that's probably not even actually realistic, so the blunt of entertainment has to be delivered through the characters reacting and talking about the shoot, which is not always entertaining or flows well. In fact, they'll often make pretty mild attempts at comedy as a way to lighten the mood of war, even if it doesn't fit the scene. Again, this is inevitable because the story has different goals with all of these elements. It's not meant to be fun, it's meant to be realistic, and those goals are absolutely met. This complaint could be considered null and void by many. That episode where they get to the German concentration camp is genuinely great, and I've seen way too many stories try to clone it because of just how impactful it is, but it's also subtle enough to make sense. Like, all the horrors that happen in the location are implied in the writing of the episode, which makes it even more terrifying. I love that this episode toned down the comedy a lot to portray such absolute tragedies that happened at these locations. I think that made it more effective, and I'm glad they kept the comedy up even during the low tier serious moments throughout, as this makes the lack of it here even more somber. This episode absolutely hits like a truck. As for all the others, some hit, some don't. It's short of 10 episodes, so when episodes feel underwhelming, it's not too big of a deal. You'll most likely just forget about them by the time you get to the next good one. What else is there to say? Russ from Friends is an asshole general, and I cannot take him seriously because he's the Unagi guy. Big question, should you eat it? No, it's been in the fridge for 3 weeks and most certainly spoiled, you're gonna get food poisoning and die. Oh, as for whether you should watch Band of Brothers, I think it depends on how familiar you are with the subgenre. War stories get more generic the more you experience them, and even if you've never seen one done as well as this, I think a lot of the entertainment value comes from the novelty. I guess maybe if you are the entire opposite and love the novelty and war movies, you'd be an exception to this rule, but in that case you wouldn't need me to tell you nothing. The other reason why I would give you an outright no is if you're just done and tired with patriotic US shenanigans. While I frankly don't really bother to care because I'm just here to watch shows and make funny videos about it, I can see someone get frustrated at how often they show up plots the US and underplays how standard, low-ranking soldiers are sometimes fodder casualties as if it's not completely messed up. I think the show is based on events that happened a long time ago, and the state of affairs was different, which means I personally don't blame the show at all for these themes and portrayals. They tried to go above and beyond to show why the situation sucked for the people there, but that's under a layer of trying to portray even more explicitly that these people felt a certain way about their victory and position, as it exactly is what happened and what they felt. It's not meant to be a commentary about the military, only a reenactment. If you're really bothered by it enough to despise seeing it on screen, this is entirely a you thing and that's perfectly fine. Trust me, I'm fed up with all that shit too. Otherwise, I guess I recommend it. I didn't think it was the best thing ever made, especially not for Letterboxd users to sit it at the top as if it wasn't easily triumphed by many other popular shows. I don't even have to go to Breaking Bad and Sopranos. Slime, Fiona and Cake was incredible and I can only give it an offhand mention here. That's rude. I just found Band of Brothers to be generally boring, and thus I didn't know if I should recommend it. I don't even know how boring it actually was and how much it was my perspective. I'm not you, I don't know what you like. In fact, I'm probably not even a good example of a middle of the road opinion because I end up having a strong opinion about this and that, and can I even trust my own recommendations? I wanna say yes, watch it because you may like it and it's short, but my heart really means to say hell nah, just hit up Saving Private Ryan and save yourself the time. In fact, just go watch JoJo. It's fantastical, completely inaccurate, 7 of the 8 finished parts have massive glaring problems, and yet I still got more value out of it than anything Band of Brothers covers. Full disclosure, I'm just done being subjective for this list. Excuse me. I dislike ratings. I just hate average score ratings, cause to my perspective, here's how I rank these shows. Planet Earth, Chernobyl, Band of Brothers, Dekalog, Cowboy Bebop, Fullmetal Alchemist, Twin Peaks, Monster, The Garden Wall, and Ping-Pong The Animation. And sure, it's fun for me to put them like this, but I hate that rankings skew opinions. Sure, it skews opinions in regards of the shows, but that's the lesser issue I have with it. My real problem is that reviews give people bias in the quality of a reviewer. Strong opinions, whether positive or negative, feel like a way to deal with because they just make people angry. Confirmation bias is a bitch that plagues the world more than the blood in the rivers of Egypt in that one story, so it's disappointing to see subjective opinions about media and its potential meaning disregarded because an objective consensus was supposedly reached. One of my favorite shows of all time is, spoilers for the Netflix video, sorry, BoJack Horseman, and yet my buddy old Paul fucking hates it. He doesn't like many elements of the show that from my perspective make it outstanding. So when he told me, I was pretty disappointed, until I thought about it a little. Why the fuck should I be disappointed that my friend doesn't like this? If anything, I should be disappointed at its IMDb rating for making me think his opinion isn't valid because a large number of people disagree. I started this video approaching every show kinda like I wanted to speak about them objectively.
But the more I went on about it, the more I realized objectivity can't apply even a little to this collection. These shows aren't the quote-unquote the top 10 best shows ever, besides the fact that I ignore a few things in the list. These shows are simply 10 shows of different qualities and nothing else.
4 of them are Japanese animation, all of which have different vibes and themes and goals. 2 of them are dramatizations of real life events. 1 is a documentary and another one is just a portfolio of some guy who makes short films. At least with the Netflix list I had something definitive to point as a correlation between the shows. Here I've got a shelly list from Letterboxd. And that's such a weight on a reviewer. Objective criteria exist on a small sample because you can gauge what these samples would have in common. But the larger you get and the more topics you involve, the more assumptions you have to make for an objective conclusion. Reviews shouldn't be this way. There's so much value and artistry that can be given to them instead of just spewing facts about what works and what doesn't. Look at my own reviews. The Fullmetal Alchemist review is just kinda like a rant. The Over the Garden Wall review is absolutely beautiful, and then what the fuck am I doing for the Band of Brothers review? Just speaking about it, going on and on and on about things I liked and disliked? Sure, that has a value of its own, and I'll keep reviewing media due to my psychotic fanaticism, but my goal is never to be the voice of reason for what's good and what's bad. I do these reviews as a means to an end.
I'm not the guy who's gonna sit down to find out if these shows actually deserve their super invented grade they've been given. I'm the guy who drops random recommendations for shows for literally no reason whatsoever, and then realize I can use this random quirk to lead my silly video to a proper, more fulfilling conclusion that represents me as both a reviewer and creator a lot better. Henceforth, my final verdict.
Watch what you want, like what you want to like, and consider that I didn't watch the Letterboxd top 10 so you wouldn't have to. I did it so you would try to. Foxy jump scare?